Hey you guys, my name is David Phillips. I am from a little town called Boonville, Mississippi. I'm 27 years old. Starting out in life early. Um, I was very blessed. He was always there. I just didn't realize it growing up. But my mom, whenever she was in labor. She was given the opportunity. My grandmother was given the opportunity to keep me or my mother, and like my grandmother chose my mom, of course, because she knows her more, and I just was blessed enough to make it through that. So just starting out early, like I was blessed beyond measure without even knowing it growing up. A miracle baby, I guess some would say. Um, Growing up, it was a little tough. My dad, he was in and out of institutions, pretty much has been my whole life. So I grew up without a father. Um, so as a young man, I guess you would say, a lot of stuff was through trial and error. I had to learn a lot of stuff on my own. I never had a guy figure in my life, so a lot of stuff that I had to learn on my own. I remember my first memory as a little boy was I was being passed around this party, and people were asking whose kid is this, and so nobody knew, and I just remember this strange woman holding me and asking who this kid was, and like these guys, they come and took my father, so like that was a very traumatic part of my life. Like I remember that. So growing up, he was never around. Like I said, a lot of stuff I just kind of had to figure out on my own. Um, my mom had a great mother. She was always there. She was very supportive. Single mother of four, but always made sure that the things we needed we had. And so fast forward, like I played baseball growing up. She supported that. She was very supportive. Um, Around 12, I would say around 11 years old, skip past all of the other stuff. Um, I grew up around a lot of people who um, some say would be prejudiced. Um, I grew up around a lot of prejudiced people. My dad was, and with um, Aryan brothers, which are full of hate. So I grew up feeling that tension, feeling that animosity, um, and I never understood it because I was wired differently. So I always looked at things different than that, and I never understood how somebody could hate just because of color and all of that. So I stuck out anyway. My grandpa, he was kind of the same way, and just like I remember whenever I was a little boy, my grandpa and my dad got into it, and my grandpa ended up shooting him, and that was kind of the last memory that I had of my dad being around. Um, Around 11 years old, my mom, she got married to this other dude, my stepdad, and that's whenever I started spiraling down, started thinking about drugs. I guess you'd say I was around the wrong people, which was my family, and I had a buddy over, and my cousin and my cousin was there too, and they were a couple of years older than I was, um, and I'd never heard about it, but I guess people huff gas, so they were like huffing gas, and I thought to myself, because my stepdad drank, that I would go get some beer to keep him from doing that. So I went and got some beer out of his fridge, and a day went by. We was in there during the night. We was in there cutting up, wrestling around like little boys do, and put a hole in the wall. So my stepdad told my buddy he had to go home, and he had nowhere to go because he had got into it with his stepdad. So he left my house. I talked my aunt into letting him go to stay with them for a little while, and the next day we got a phone call, and they were in a shed. They was working on a BB gun that I sent with my cousin where they could shoot at target practice, and they were in the shed, and there was a gas jug in there, and fumes caught up. Whether or not they were huffing gas, I don't know, but They couldn't get out. By the time they did, 70% of his body was burned. And he made it like 3 months, but he ended up passing away. So, like, growing up from that point on, I kind of blamed myself. Thought that there was something that I could have done differently if I would have just never allowed them to start doing that to begin with. And just went and told somebody, all of that possibly could have been prevented, is the way that I thought to myself. So from that point on, I kind of spiraled out. That's whenever, like, I absolutely don't understand how things played out the way that they did, because I hated drugs from that point on. Like, I saw what happened to my dad because of drugs, my mom. So I had a hate for drugs, and still I can't comprehend why at that point I spiraled to drugs. But through that process, I blame myself, which I think pushed me further to the drugs. And I was diagnosed with ADHD at a young age, and that was, looking back, I think that had a lot to do with my addiction. They put me on what they call Adderall, which is for people who have ADHD, and everything was going good. Like, it really helped me. It really helped me a lot, actually, just to skip, like, everything was good up until it wasn't. Around 17, I was a sophomore in high school, and I had another buddy, and at this time we were just kind of, wasn't really doing anything too bad in our eyes. It was just kind of marijuana, and he was from Ohio. He had moved down to Mississippi from Ohio, and he ended up moving in with me because his grandma couldn't really afford Mississippi. Ohio, their benefits were better. So it came to the point to where my buddy, he'd come to Mississippi because he had a lot of trouble in Ohio. He was in a gang, and it was a lot different up there than what it is in Mississippi. So he moved down there because it was dangerous for him, the life that he had chosen and the decisions he had made. So he came to Mississippi to get out of that. And then it came to the point to where he needed somewhere to stay. So I opened up my house to him, and once again, stupid choices, bad decisions. We thought that we could somehow get our own place to where we wouldn't have to be under parents, and we started selling pot. And I had my own apartment, but it was right beside my mom's house. She was the one who was paying for the apartment. She was just letting me live there. And she found out about that, and after she found out, she kind of was like, okay, you're either both going to have to move out, or your buddy's going to have to move out. So I told him that he was going to have to move out, and about a week later, he had to move to Ohio. And so from that point, we got a call a week after he was gone, and they found him. He went back to Ohio, and somebody shot him twice, and they found him on the sidewalk. Once again, something I blame myself for. So from that point, things changed completely. Like, it went from pot to pills to basically just pot and pills, I guess you'd say. And around 19, after I graduated high school, I got cut off of my Adderall, my prescription medicine, which was, in my mind, I think it was kind of reframing me from doing other stuff other than pot, and the pills were Adderall. But it was kind of slowing my addiction down, I guess you would say. And then after I got cut off of the medicine, everything was different. I didn't know how to handle life. I was 19, fresh out of high school. I moved out around 16 years old, pretty much living from place to place, but making sure I was providing for myself. But around 19 is whenever I got introduced to a drug called methamphetamines, and like, it was just a wild, quick ride. Everything happened quick. My grandpa passed away and I inherited his house, and fresh out of high school, had it made, had what most men would work their entire life for, kind of handed to me, um, and I had the place for around 3 years, and it got to the point to where they wanted the full amount of the house that was the full amount owed on the house, or I was going to have to move out. So, like, I told myself that if I could just get rid of all of these other things, the tractor, the truck, all of these other materials, I could just keep the place, the house. And so I started selling off little by little all of my stuff that my grandpa had worked his whole life for. And it was very sentimental stuff, but as I started selling it off, like, the drugs had such a hold on me that I thought, oh, well, I can just spend a little bit of this and I'll still be good, in the back of my mind. And I lived like that for a year. Chose the drugs over paying my bills, and just really a dark time in my life, I guess you'd say. And around 22, I ended up losing the place, and things from that point was the worst point in my life, I would say. I was living out of a backpack, carrying around ramen noodles, living homeless. My mom, she was the only parent that I had. She didn't want anything to do with me because I kind of pushed her away out of greed to try to, I guess, keep the place. So greed took over. Anyway, so at this point, I was in and out of jail around 20 times within a year. And the last time that I went to jail, my neighbor had bought the house that was mine. And I got out of jail and I come home and they had a dumpster, and it was still completely up with everything that I owned. And I went to get some of it, and he was like, basically told me I couldn't get any of it. So that was just kind of devastating, and I lost myself. Started hanging out with the wrong crowd, and make a long story short, the crowd that I was running with, they had broke into a place. This is around, I'm 24 years old. They had broke into a house, and I didn't really know that they had done this, but I didn't have anywhere to go. So, like, I got put in a situation to where I was going to help them move something. Well, come to find out, it was stuff that they had stolen. So, after that night, 2 weeks goes by, and I get a call, and the police are looking for me, and they're like, we have a warrant for your arrest, and they tell me that I have 2 counts of burglary. So I go and turn myself in, and when I turn myself in, I sat in there for 5 months, sat in there for 5 months, and then this woman come to me, and she asked me if I wanted to get into a place. I was going to go to a 90-day program, but she thought that I needed more than that, which was an 8-month program is what she brought up. And I said, sure, I'll go. And so she says, I'm going to take you to Kentucky, is where I started out. It was a mission in Kentucky. And she said, I'm going to pay for your deposit to get you home. I'm going to take you there. Everything's going to be took care of. And she said it might be a week before we can get you in there. Within the next day, she was there, and I was headed to Kentucky. And 30 minutes out, she said her name, and it kind of hit me, and it dawned on me who she was. I remember seeing in the house a picture of her, and it kind of hit me like, this is this woman's house that I got charged for breaking and entering. And she noticed that I knew who she was, so she got me. We was eating. And she got me back in the car, and as soon as she got me back in the car, she said, I just want you to know, when you get your paperwork, I will be on it. I'll be on your indictment. And she said, I want you to know God forgives you, and I forgive you, and you need to forgive yourself. I don't think that you should go to prison for this. God just wants you to change your ways. And from that point on, that was God's forgiveness. for my life, and it became real. I started to realize that, God was closer than I had really ever imagined. So from that point on, it was back in 2018, my life was completely changed. I started out in Kentucky, um, stayed there for 7 months. Then I went from Kentucky to a mission in Ohio, and I stayed over in Ohio to become a full counselor. And I left and I went back home, and I knew that God had a bigger plan and a calling on my life, and I was still fighting with it because I was young, and so I kind of wanted to do my own thing. So I went back home, and it wasn't time for me to go back home, and I bumped my head a little bit, and God told me to come back to the mission. So I went to Ohio to start out, coming back in 2019, and I stayed there for close to a year, and I moved from Ohio to Arkansas, and I stayed in Arkansas for 5 months, and I was doing an overseer over there. I made graduate staff, and I decided to come to Iowa, and since I've been in Iowa, um, it's been a journey, but the Lord has I've always wanted out of Mississippi, and God was the only way that could ever happen. And I'm just truly blessed because God opened doors that nobody else could, and I realize that now. So like I'm very blessed to be in Iowa. Since I've been here, I've learned a lot about the things and the decisions that I've done that have went wrong, and what I need to do now. And the Bible tells us to bless are the ones who hunger and thirst for His righteousness, for they shall be fulfilled. And that's what I did when I came into the mission. I was very hungry and I was very thirsty because I knew what it was like to not have food and not have water. So I took that state of mind and I said, if I can think about God and His righteousness the way that I think about getting food for the day and drinking for the day, then I will be okay. So I stood on that promise, and I just watched, and I thank you, Lord, for your presence. He's so good. But I just watched the Lord show up in my life, and He's truly poured out blessings that I can't even imagine. Put me in a loving environment around good, godly people. So I just thank y'all for all y'all's support, and God bless.